Northeast of the town of Bowling Green, Ohio, in Wood County, sits a dirt road headed west off County Road 74, a little south of US Route 20. Sitting at the end of the road are the remnants of an old house, burned to the ground many years ago. No one's sure exactly when. The family who lived there escaped with their lives, except for one, an infant child, left in its crib as the fires raged, helpless, unable to do anything but cry. And if you were to walk down that dirt road in the middle of the night and reach the collapsed roof of the house, they say you can still hear the baby's cry, distant, unreachable, and terrified. And many heard it. As legend of the road spread, it became a common destination for thrill-seeking teenagers looking for a remote spot to drink a beer, make out with their sweethearts, and see how long they can last in such a haunted place. Many claimed they heard the young child's wailings, and soon the road took on a new name, Crybaby Lane. That's one story, at least. There's another. Southwest of Bowling Green sits Euler Road, a wooded stretch of paved street in the middle of nowhere. Many years ago, a mother was walking along this road with her baby in her arms. She looked up at the branches hanging over the road, and something came over her. A moment of madness? A possession from a demon, perhaps. We'll never know why she hung her child from that tree, its body left swinging back and forth in the branches. And here, too, they say you can hear an infant cry in the dead of night, and you look up and see the branches of the trees sway as if someone was hanging from them. In time, Euler Road took on a new name, Crybaby Lane. Two Crybaby Lanes, a mere 30 miles away from each other. It's no wonder that the legends left an impression on one of its residents. The high school kids go out there to party. The dare is to spend the night there. I never did, but my brother said he did. I don't really know if he did. He might just have been trying to impress me or scare me. It's all very mystical to me. It's likely that Peter Lauer here was referring to the first of the two Crybaby Lanes. It seems to be the older of the two legends. The earliest reference to the burning house version I could find dates to 1978, while the earliest reference to the hanging tree version dates to 1987. But no doubt both legends were on Lauer's mind when he started writing his script in 1995. Peter Lauer was a television director, coming out of the music video scene to direct for Nickelodeon shows such as The Adventures of Pete and Pete and The Secret World of Alex Mack. To help bring the urban legends of his youth to the screen, Lauer teamed up with Bob Mittenthal, a Nickelodeon legend, co-creator of Double Dare, creator of Welcome Freshmen, writer for The Adventures of Pete and story editor for Ah, Real Monsters. The intent was to make an actual theatrical movie through Paramount Pictures, which had just been acquired by Viacom the year prior, meaning there's a universe where the first Nickelodeon movie was not Harriet the Spy, but Crybaby Lane. This didn't happen, and the script was mothballed for a few years until somebody in the Nickelodeon offices suggested making it as a television movie. Production began in earnest in the final months of 1999.
Saturday, Nickelodeon brings you its first ever Halloween movie for television. Crybaby Lane, Saturday at 9/8 Central in a special Halloween snick.
The film, while meant to emulate the rural Ohio Lauer grew up in, was predominantly shot in central New Jersey, with the communities of Columbus and Kingston providing most of the town locations, and Upper Freehold serving many of the outskirt farm locations. Crybaby Lane, Nickelodeon's second original feature-length made-for-TV movie, premiered on October 28, 2000, as a part of Snick. The broadcast featured bumpers with Melissa Joan Hart, then of Sabrina the Teenage Witch fame, getting you in the mood for something proper spooky.
So, pop up some popcorn, get a blanket to hide under, and maybe one more thing. Some company on the couch. Here comes Nick's original movie, Crybaby Lane.
One evening, brothers Andrew and Carl are visiting their best friend, Mr. Bennett, the local funeral director. You know, the kind of guy kids love to hang around. Mr. Bennett tells them a story, that of conjoined twins born to a farmer. He was so ashamed of his children that he hid them away in his house, and quickly realized that one of the twins was good, and the other was evil. When the twins died at a young age, the farmer had them separated, and the good twin was buried in the local cemetery, while the bad twin was buried at the end of an old road. A road that has now taken the name Crybaby Lane.
Because legend has it, anyone caught out there at night on that desolate road can hear the cries of the evil child calling for vengeance from beyond the grave.
No way.
Andrew and Carl decide to use the local legend to scare some girls from their school, so they find a random grave, root up a nearby plant, and hide a tape recorder for a fake midnight seance. However, this turns out to be a string of bad luck. 1, the Crybaby Lane story is real. 2, it turns out the twins were put in the wrong graves. The evil twin was buried at the cemetery, while the good twin was buried out in the lane. 3, the random grave the brothers chose just so happened to be where the evil twin was buried. 4, it turns out that disturbing a specific root is enough to wake up the evil twin's spirit and cause him to go on a rampage in this small Ohio town, possessing random townsfolk, giving them white glowing eyes, and having them commit acts of destructive mischief. Older brother Carl ends up possessed, so it's up to little brother Andrew to figure out what's going on and save his town before evil spirits destroy everything. A quest that ultimately takes him to Crybaby Lane to find the other child's grave. Crybaby Lane is an odd duck of a film. As a straightforward horror piece, it's a bit of a mixed bag. With the majority of the film taking place at night, production worked on a swing shift schedule, starting at 3 in the afternoon and working until 4 in the morning, with cinematography from another Pete and Pete alum, John Inwood. The results definitely look better than your typical day-for-night post-production work, but a lot of this feels flat in other ways. The film really could have benefited from some texture, from some wind blowing leaves around, some more dynamic angles, something a little more moody than baseball stadium lighting in these cornfield scenes. There are a few screen warping effects when Andrew ends up underground, confronting ghosts and finding skeletons, but otherwise it's a very flatly shot horror film. The opening sequence where the two kids are biking through town in the dead of night, when no one's around, is probably the spookiest segment in the entire film. Things look deserted. The kids feel isolated, like they're the only people who exist in the world. Having lived in small towns similar to the one seen here, I've experienced this kind of thing myself. When all the businesses are closed and everyone's asleep, and you may as well be a ghost yourself, walking down those dark streets. It's too bad that the music ruins it. It was composed by Andrew Barrett, who was no stranger to horror soundtracks, being the orchestrator on films like A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, Parents, and Lost Highway. However, orchestrator is not the same as composer, and for Crybaby Lane, Barrett opted for something that I can only describe as 50s beach party horror music. According to Lauer, Tom Waits had originally been considered for the role of Bennett the funeral director, which could have been wild, but the role eventually went to Frank Langella. In a 2011 interview for TheDaily.com, Lauer said Nickelodeon insisted on Langella in hopes of generating publicity, and publicity from what? Is pre-Frost Nixon Frank Langella a get for children in the year 2000? Look, kids, it's the 9th most famous Dracula. It's live-action Skeletor. It's the detective from Brain Scan. Granted, Tom Waits wasn't going to be a draw for the target demographic either, but going with Langella was a lateral move at best. The role of Bennett is kinda weird, and I don't know how much to attribute to the script and how much to Langella's performance. Bennett is a man with dark knowledge. We learn that he was directly involved with the separation and burial of the conjoined twins. You would expect him to be either a disturbed figure, someone haunted by his past, taking the events of the film as a quest for redemption, or a morally ambiguous man who relishes the dark and macabre. He's an undertaker in a horror movie. We should be questioning what he's up to. But instead, Bennett is just like a guy, a normal dude trying to run a business, trying to get through his day.
You know, the average person swallows 5 spiders a year in his sleep. It's a fact.
I guess you're really upset with me about your mom's funeral, huh? Well, look, it was an honest mistake, Anne. She wasn't presentable.
Here, look, see, it's all itemized.
I never asked for cold cuts.
$30 for coffee. Are you trying to exploit us?
I just assumed.
Typical.
It's standard stuff.
Oh, hey, Jim Gaffigan. For being the film's central exposition character, Bennett doesn't seem to know a lot about what's going on. Like, there's this whole detail about a root that springs up from corpses when they're buried, and when you pull them out, it disturbs the dead person's spirit. But Bennett isn't the character who knows that, despite being the funeral guy. Instead, we learn it from this goofy groundskeeper who's in the middle of an unrelated subplot about faking an injury to get out of work.
He's a disk drive, gigabyte, mini disc, megabyte, RAM, ROM, fun-loving man.
So fine.
And then Bennett just kind of stops being in the movie after he gets his ass kicked by a small child with a plastic lightsaber.
Excuse me? All right, that's it, kid.
Crybaby Lane does have its share of creepy moments. The glowing eyes thing is some pretty cheap post-processing, but the image of Carl wiping clean a steamed mirror to reveal his possession has become something of the film's defining image. The black and white intro, where Bennett tells the story of Crybaby Lane, feels like someone adding a narrative to Are You Afraid of the Dark's iconic opening sequence. And there's a quick scene where Andrew is being pressured by a girl to kiss her, and when he finally gives in, this happens. It's a quick scene, and it's television CGI from 2000, but it's not effective. Oh, and the film gets a lot of work out of this one hearse, including an extended police car chase that's not badly done at all, climaxing with the car getting absolutely wrecked. There is some quality stuff in Crybaby Lane. It just doesn't add up to a satisfying whole. I think there's 2 ways you could have gone with it. There's enough here that you could have shortened the script to a tighter 45-minute special. Get rid of the fluff, and you're cooking. Or you lean harder in the non-horror weirdness. Half of the crew already comes from the Adventures of Pete and Pete. Maybe they should have made it more in that style. Imagining this movie taking place in the Pete and Pete universe, and suddenly Frank Langella getting beat up by a toy lightsaber doesn't seem that absurd. One of the young teen girls being played by a large adult woman in a beret would fit right in alongside Artie, the strongest man in the world. In any case, Crybaby Lane by itself is a just okay Halloween movie with a couple of creepy images. Nickelodeon re-aired it the next day, and after that, it sat in a vault, forgotten about for a decade. Then came 2011, and Crybaby Lane became a point of interest for the nostalgia and lost media scenes on the internet. And the lost media scene does have a tendency to aim a little spooky from time to time. Many videos about lost media online take on a strange, haunted vibe, as if these things are forbidden secrets and not just stuff that aired on TV and didn't get a DVD release. Some of this does come from a genuine place, because the search for a lot of this stuff starts with memory fragments from one's childhood, and scary memories tend to stick with you. In terms of Nickelodeon, the most famous example of spooky, lost then found media is, of course, the Gibby pilot. But Clockman is a close second. A short that probably aired on Pinwheel in the early 1980s, the search for Clockman came about because an impressionable child saw it, found it scary, grew up, and started asking about it online, sharing his fuzzy memories of this spooky thing. It became, in a sense, an urban legend, one of those campfire ghost stories, only with an actual real cartoon at the end of it all. Crybaby Lane faced a similar situation, with people converging online, sharing fractured memories of this one movie they saw 10 years ago, and wondering why Nickelodeon never aired it again. Why they never put it out on DVD. Did parents complain? Gasp! Was Crybaby Lane banned for being too spooky? The truth is that far too many people conflate banned with not airing right now. Nickelodeon hasn't aired Gullah Gullah Island since 2000. That doesn't mean Gullah Gullah Island is banned. It just means Nickelodeon doesn't think it would be profitable to air Gullah Gullah Island anymore. Crybaby Lane was a mediocre, made-for-TV horror film with no bankable stars. None of the child actors in it became more than indie musician famous, and who knows what the ratings were like. What airs on television often has less to do with its content and more to do with how much advertisers want to pay to run commercials on it. A new horror film during the Halloween season? Sure, Nintendo might be willing to pay a few extra dollars to run a Pokemon Gold and Silver commercial during that. A rerun of that horror movie after it failed to set the world on fire? You'd be lucky to get Fruit of the Loom. Advertisers are going to be less interested, so they'll pay less for the commercial spots, so Nickelodeon has less incentive to run it again. But none of that matters when it comes to the internet rumor mill, and soon Crybaby Lane was banned and became an internet fact, one that you can still see on the film's Wikipedia page and Lost Media wiki page. It's not true, of course. Even Peter Lauer was surprised that people were saying it was banned. I didn't know anything about it being banned until you told me about it. All I know is that they aired it once. I just assumed they didn't show it again because they didn't like it. I did it, I thought it failed, and I moved on. Unlike Clockman, where people didn't know the cartoon's actual name and struggled to find it, Crybaby Lane was an easy film to look up. And when the search for it began in earnest in 2011, it was only a matter of months before someone found a recorded copy of it and uploaded it to YouTube. And that ended up being irrelevant because people were talking about the film online, which meant there was a nostalgic audience for it, meaning Nickelodeon had a market incentive to air the film again. So Crybaby Lane aired on Teen Nick in October of 2011. And boy, did they lean into the whole banned movie narrative. It's aired a handful of times more since, the most recent in 2017, giving us much cleaner copies than an old VHS recording. Crybaby Lane is decidedly not lost anymore. However, there is one more element we need to talk about. The elephant in the room when it comes to Crybaby Lane. And that's the stories about what went on behind the scenes during the film's production. In 2011, around the time everyone on Reddit was talking about finding the movie, one of the production's interns came forward. According to him, the director really wanted to push the horror elements of the story much further than what you see on screen. Much further than even the scariest episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark? He wanted characters to die in gruesome manners. He wanted scenes featuring cannibalism. He really wanted to make something inappropriate for children. Of course there was pushback. Nickelodeon wasn't going to allow any of that. But then, trying to get people to understand his vision, he gathered his crew into a room, hooked up a projector, and played a silent, black and white film of a boy with his arms cut off, bleeding to death on the floor. The intern wasn't sure if it was special effects, but it seemed like a genuine snuff film, and he left production shortly thereafter. And that's the story of Crybaby Lane. None of that is true, of course. The intern story is a creepypasta, an internet urban legend, written while the film was still lost and interest in it was at its peak. And I think that's the perfect legacy for Crybaby Lane. It's a so-so movie on its own, but it was born out of the local horror stories that mystified its writer and director in his youth. As with the oral storytelling that feeds urban legends and campfire tales, Lauer took half-remembered horrors and changed them to fit a new vision. And that horror story mystified the next generation. And with half-remembered horrors, they told their own versions of it, to fit a new vision. Crybaby Lane isn't the scariest movie ever. It's not really scary at all. But it just might be the most true to the tradition of scary stories.